The morning of her wedding, Emily Calloway stood in front of a floor-length mirror and thought about numbers. Not the traditional kind of numbers a bride thinks about: how many guests, how many flowers, how many minutes until the ceremony. She thought about percentages, debt ratios, the $16.3 million that Callaway Capital had hemorrhaged in the last fiscal quarter, the number of board members who had quietly stopped returning her calls, and then the final number, 1. One man, chosen by her father 2 weeks ago at a dinner Emily had not been invited to, who would, according to the terms her father had described in the cold language of a business contract, stabilize the family's position through a strategic union. She had laughed when her father first told her. She had stopped laughing when she realized he was not joking. Now, looking at herself in the mirror ivory dress, hair pinned precisely, a face trained since childhood to reveal nothing, Emily Calloway prepared to marry a man she had met exactly twice, a man whose name was Daniel Hayes, a man who showed up to both meetings in the same gray jacket, carrying a child on his hip like it was the most natural thing in the world. The child's name was Lily. She was 6 years old. She had her father's dark eyes, and a serious expression that seemed, somehow, to belong to a much older person. Emily had shaken Daniel's hand at the first meeting and felt nothing but the roughness of his palm. At the second meeting, she had barely looked at him. The ceremony was held at the Whitmore Hotel, a venue that Emily's mother had selected before the family's financial troubles had become undeniable. The ballroom was too large for the guest list, which meant the empty chairs were visible from the altar. Someone had tried to compensate with extra floral arrangements. The effect was not elegant. It was desperate. Emily walked down the aisle alone. Her father was seated in the front row. His health had declined sharply in the last 6 months, and he watched her with an expression she had spent 31 years learning to read. It was the expression he wore when a deal was closing. Satisfaction, tinged with calculation. She did not look at him for long. Daniel Hayes was already standing at the altar. He wore a navy suit that fit reasonably well but was clearly not new. His shoes were polished. She noticed that, despite herself, but the leather was beginning to crack at the toe. He stood straight. He did not fidget. Beside him, pressed to his right leg, was Lily, wearing a white dress with small yellow flowers embroidered along the collar. The girl was looking at Emily with those dark, unblinking eyes. Emily looked away first. The ceremony was short. The officiant kept it brisk, the way people keep things brisk when everyone in the room understands that the occasion is, at its core, a formality. Emily spoke her vows in the clear, measured tone she used for board presentations. Daniel spoke his quietly. Not nervously, there was no tremor in his voice, no swallowed syllable. Just quietly, like a man who understood that words were not always meant to fill a room. When it was over, and the sparse applause was fading, Emily felt a hand slip into hers. Small, warm, Lily's. She looked down. The girl was not looking at her. She was looking straight ahead, holding both her father's hand and Emily's, as though this were simply a practical matter of navigation. Emily did not pull away. She did not know why. At the reception, it took 11 minutes for the first comment to reach her. Her cousin Bridget, 2 glasses of champagne in, and wearing the particular smile of someone who has decided to be honest tonight, leaned close and said, "I heard he fixes appliances, like, for a living. Is that true?" Emily said nothing. "I'm just asking," Bridget said, "because your father always said you'd marry someone from the industry. And now there's this man who, he seems perfectly nice, Emily, but he's a single father who repairs refrigerators, and I'm wondering if you're—" "Bridget." "What?" "Stop talking." Bridget stopped, but the comment had already done its work. Emily glanced across the room to where Daniel was standing with Lily at a small table near the back. He had found her a plate of food, something off the children's menu that the caterers had apparently not prepared for, but had assembled anyway, and he was helping her cut it into pieces small enough to manage. His attention was entirely on the child. He had not looked up once since the reception began. A man from her company's accounting department, whose name Emily could never remember, appeared at her elbow. "That's him?" he said. "Yes," Emily said. He said nothing more, but his silence was eloquent. She picked up a glass of champagne she did not intend to drink and looked at Daniel Hayes across the room. He had Lily on his knee now. He was saying something to her, something low and close, and the girl was nodding solemnly, still eating. Emily said, loud enough for the accounting man to hear, "I didn't choose this." Across the room, Daniel Hayes looked up. For one moment, through the noise of the reception and the distance between them, their eyes met. She couldn't tell what she expected to see in his face. Embarrassment, maybe, some awareness of how he was being perceived. An apology. Instead, he simply looked at her, steady, without expression. Then he looked back down at his daughter. Emily turned away. The penthouse had 3 bedrooms, 4 floors up from the street, and a view of the financial district that Emily had spent 4 years working toward. She had chosen every piece of furniture herself. The kitchen was exact. The bookshelves were organized by subject and then by author. The throw pillows were the color of sea glass because a designer had told her 3 years ago that sea glass was calming, and she had believed this at the time. On the first morning after the wedding, she came into the kitchen at 6:15 to find Daniel already there. He was making breakfast. Not a complex breakfast: eggs, toast, a glass of juice, a small bowl of fruit that he had already cut into the kind of careful, uniform pieces that suggested he had done this particular task 10,000 times. He was not using her copper pans, which she had not given him permission to use. He was using a small non-stick pan he had apparently brought from wherever he had been living before. Lily was seated at the kitchen island, still in pajamas, watching her father work with the calm attention of someone who finds the ordinary world genuinely interesting. Emily stopped in the doorway. Daniel looked over his shoulder, saw her, and said, "Good morning, there's coffee. I didn't know how you take it, so I left it black." "I take it black," Emily said. "Good." He turned back to the pan. "I'll stay out of your way as much as possible. I know this arrangement is not what either of us would have chosen." Emily poured herself coffee. "I'm going to need ground rules, all right? My office is the 2nd bedroom. It's off limits. I keep irregular hours. You and the child should not plan around me. Her name is Lily." Emily paused. "I know that." "You said, the child." A beat of silence. "Lily," Emily said, "you and Lily should not plan around my schedule." Daniel nodded. He slid the eggs onto a plate and set it in front of his daughter. Lily picked up her fork without being asked and began to eat. "What do you do?" Emily said. "For work." The question came out before she had decided to ask it. Daniel considered it for a moment. "I work in investment consulting." Emily looked at him. The gray jacket, the cracked shoes. "For whom?" "Myself, mostly." And that's she stopped herself. It was not her business. It was not a conversation she was interested in having. She picked up her coffee and her laptop bag from the table by the door. "I'll be home after 8. Don't wait." She left without finishing the coffee. 3 weeks in, Emily had not revised her assessment. She had, however, accumulated data. Daniel woke before 6 every morning. He made Lily's breakfast and walked her to the school 4 blocks away, a public school, which Emily found she had thoughts about and kept those thoughts carefully to herself. He returned by 8:30. After that, he was difficult to track because she was at the office by the time he came back, and by the time she came home, Lily was in bed and Daniel was usually in his room, the door halfway closed, the blue light of a screen visible through the gap. Once, she had walked past at 11:30 at night and heard him speaking on the phone. His voice was different, lower, more deliberate, with none of the easy quiet of his ordinary conversation. He was saying something about a secondary position in a derivatives portfolio. The language was precise, professional. Emily stood in the hallway for 6 seconds. Then she went to bed. Her colleagues at Callaway Capital had noticed the change in her personal life, as she had known they would. Most of them were tactful enough to say nothing directly. Gerald Monroe, her CFO, was not most people. "I heard your husband is in the service industry," Gerald said. On a Thursday morning, the words deployed with the precision of someone who has been saving them. "He's in consulting," Emily said. Gerald looked at her over his glasses. "Is that what he told you?" "Gerald," Emily said, "the Meridian proposal is due by noon. Focus." He focused, but the question hung in the air for the rest of the day, irritating her in the way that imprecise data irritates someone who prefers clarity. That evening, she came home early, meaning 7:15, which was unusual, and found Daniel at the kitchen table with his laptop open and Lily doing homework at the opposite end. The screen of Daniel's laptop was angled away from her, but she caught a fragment of what was on it before he turned it fully. A dashboard of some kind, dense with numbers, graphs trending in multiple directions, column headers she recognized as financial indices. She recognized them because she worked with financial indices every day. "Long day?" Daniel said, without looking up. "Average," Emily said. She went to her office and sat down at her desk and did not work for 17 minutes. Lily said, "On a Saturday in April. Boo isn't hungry." Emily was making coffee. She had been making coffee when Lily appeared in the kitchen doorway holding a stuffed rabbit with one eye missing. The rabbit was named Boo. Emily knew this because she had heard Lily speak to it on 3 separate occasions through the wall they shared. "I see," Emily said. "Boo is worried," Lily said. "About what?" Lily considered the question with the seriousness she brought to all questions. "About whether things are going to stay the same." Emily looked at the girl, 6 years old, wearing mismatched socks, one striped and one plain, because she apparently chose her own socks now. Daniel had mentioned this in passing, with something that sounded like quiet pride. "Things change sometimes," Emily said. "That's normal." Lily looked at her. "Boo knows." She turned and went back down the hallway. Emily stood in the kitchen for a moment, holding her coffee cup. Then she went to her office and opened her email. The first signal she noticed was the car. It appeared on a Tuesday morning, parked across the street from the building. A black sedan, current model, the kind of vehicle that costs more than most people's annual salary. It was there when Emily left at 7. It was gone by the time she returned at 8:15 that evening. She might not have registered it at all, except that it appeared again on Thursday, and again the following Monday. The second signal was a name. She was reviewing a document, a third-party analysis of a private equity movement that was beginning to concern her board, and buried on page 14, in a footnote referencing a series of anonymous capital positions, was an entity designation, DH Capital Holdings. 3 letters, 2 of which were someone's initials. She told herself it was a coincidence. The third signal was the phone call. She was home for once at 6 in the evening. She had left early because of a migraine she was refusing to call a migraine, and she heard Daniel's phone ring in the kitchen, heard him answer, and heard a single sentence before he walked out of earshot. The sentence was, "I'm aware of the timeline. Make sure the secondary position is hedged." Emily stood in the hallway. A man who fixes appliances does not hedge secondary positions, but a man who, according to the official story, works in consulting might, if the consulting was of a specific kind, with clients of a specific scale. She went to her laptop and typed in, DH Capital Holdings. The search returned very little. A registered corporate entity, Delaware-based. No public-facing information. No listed officers. That night, she lay awake and thought about what Gerald Monroe had said. "Is that what he told you?" The call from the board came on a Wednesday at 7 in the morning. Emily was already dressed. She was always already dressed. She listened to the voice of Thomas Reyes, the board's longest-serving member, deliver the news in the measured tones of a man who has delivered bad news many times and found no satisfying way to do it. Callaway Capital was in crisis. A hostile acquisition was underway. An anonymous investment vehicle structured through a series of layered holdings, difficult to trace, moving with unusual speed, had accumulated a controlling interest in the firm's publicly traded parent company. The board had 48 hours before a formal vote would strip Emily of operational control. They did not know who was behind it. She knew, sitting at her kitchen table with her coffee going cold, that she had heard that phrase before. Anonymous investment vehicle. She had read it in a footnote. She had typed the initials into a search engine and found almost nothing. She knew, and the knowing was vertiginous, like stepping off a curb that turns out to be deeper than expected. Daniel came into the kitchen at 6:45, moving quietly, the way he always moved. He saw her face and stopped. "Something's happened," he said. "The company," Emily said. "Someone is trying to take it." He was quiet for a moment. Then, carefully, "Do you know who?" "Not yet." He poured himself coffee, sat down across from her. He had a way of sitting that was very still, not rigid, just settled, like a man who has learned that restlessness costs more than it earns. "Emily," he said, slowly. "Don't," she said. He stopped. "Don't tell me I should have seen this coming. Don't tell me what I should have done differently." "I wasn't going to say either of those things." She looked at him. "Then what?" He wrapped both hands around his coffee cup, looked at the table. Then, after a long moment, "Are you certain you're looking at the right problem?" She stared at him. He said nothing more. She thought about it. Later, on the car ride to the office, his voice, the precise and unhurried way he had asked the question, as though it were not a challenge but a genuine inquiry. "Are you certain you're looking at the right problem?" She thought about the footnote, the initials, the sedan. She arrived at the office and pushed the thought down, the way she pushed down everything that was not immediately actionable, and got to work. The board meeting was not a disaster. It was worse than a disaster. It was a controlled, politely conducted evisceration. Thomas Reyes presented the numbers. The anonymous holding entity had moved faster than anyone on the legal team had anticipated. Two of her key investors, men she had personally cultivated relationships with over 4 years, had already entered negotiations with the acquiring party. One of them, a man named Stuart Fitch, who had shaken her hand at 3 different charity galas and smiled each time as though they were genuine friends, had not returned her call. Emily sat at the head of the table and kept her face entirely still. 48 hours. She drove herself home that night. No driver she needed to think without the awareness of being watched. The city scrolled past the windows, its lights multiplying on wet pavement from an afternoon rain, and she thought about 48 hours and what it meant to lose something you had built yourself, piece by piece, year after year, with your father's name as the foundation and your own work as the walls. She let herself into the penthouse at 9:45. Daniel was at the kitchen table. His laptop was open. On the screen, this time she saw it fully. Because he did not close, it was a display of financial positions so complex it took her several seconds to parse even the basic structure. Multiple instruments, layered vehicles, position sizes that, she stopped. The position sizes on his screen were not small. They were not the positions of a consultant with mid-market clients. They were the positions of someone managing multiple billions of dollars. Daniel looked up from the screen and met her eyes. Neither of them spoke. Then Emily said, very quietly, "Who are you?" Daniel closed the laptop. "It's late," he said. "You should eat something." "That is not an answer." "No," he agreed. "It isn't." He stood, moved to the refrigerator, began constructing a plate from the dinner he had apparently made and saved for her in case she came home. Emily sat down slowly at the table. "Lily asleep?" she asked, because she did not know what else to say. "Yes." "She asked about you today." "What did she ask?" "Whether you ever stop working." He set the plate in front of her. "I told her you do." Eventually, Emily looked at the plate, then at the man who had made it. "DH Capital Holdings," she said. He went very still. "That's yours," she said. Not a question. He sat down across from her, looked at his hands on the table, looked up. "Yes," he said. She didn't sleep that night. She stayed at the kitchen table long after Daniel had gone to bed, her laptop open, following threads she had not followed before because she had never thought they mattered. An anonymous fund registered in Delaware, a parent entity in Luxembourg, 3 subsidiary vehicles, each named with a random designation, each holding positions in industries she recognized: infrastructure, biotechnology, and the financial services sector that included, at its edge, the parent company of Callaway Capital. She followed the thread as far as it would go. At 2 in the morning, she found a name in a decade-old filing, a name that was not Daniel's but was his through a corporate structure so deliberately obscured it had taken her 4 hours of careful reading to find it. The valuation attached to the entity, at current market prices, was $9.2 billion. Emily closed the laptop. She sat in the dark kitchen of her own penthouse and thought about the navy suit with the cracked shoes, the small non-stick pan, the careful, uniform fruit pieces, the way he had stood at the altar quietly, not nervously, the way he had looked at her across the room at the reception when she said, "I didn't choose this," and had simply looked back, and then looked away. She thought about Lily's hand in hers. Boo is worried about whether things are going to stay the same. At some point she became aware that she was not thinking clearly anymore. That exhaustion had begun to replace thought with a less organized and more uncomfortable process. She went to bed. She did not sleep for another hour. The next morning, Daniel was in the kitchen at his usual time. He did not mention the conversation from the night before. Neither did Emily, at first. She poured her coffee. She watched him make Lily's breakfast. She watched Lily appear in her school clothes and outfit that was slightly mismatched in a way that seemed intentional rather than careless, the way all of Lily's choices seemed to carry a certain quiet deliberateness, and climb onto the kitchen stool and accept her breakfast without ceremony. "I have a board meeting at 9, Emily said. "I know," Daniel said. She looked at him. He looked back. "Did you move against my company?" she said. She kept her voice level. She was very good at keeping her voice level. Daniel was quiet for a moment. Then, "I moved capital into a position that aligned with a longer-term view I hold about the sector." He paused. "I didn't move against you. That's a distinction without a difference if the outcome is the same." "The outcome," he said, "is not yet determined." Lily, eating, did not look up from her bowl. "You have control of the vote," Emily said. "Yes." "You could strip my operational authority in 48 hours. "Yes." "Why haven't you?" He picked up his coffee cup, set it down. "Because it's not what I want." "Then what do you want?" He looked at her for a long time. Something moved in his expression, not quite readable, not quite sealed, before he said, "I want my daughter to have a stable home. That's all I've ever wanted." Emily set down her coffee. She left for the meeting. She came home early. This was, she told herself, a strategic decision. She needed information. She needed to understand the full scope of what she was dealing with. She needed to map the terrain. She came home early because she needed to see him in context. That was the story she told herself. The concierge in the lobby, a man named Philip who had worked the desk for the 11 years Emily had lived in the building and who therefore knew her movements better than most people, looked up when she came through the door at 4 in the afternoon and said, very carefully, "Your husband came back about 20 minutes ago, Miss Calloway." "Thank you, Philip," she said. She took the elevator up. She let herself in quietly. Not creeping, she lived here. She had a right to move in her own home, but without her usual purposeful rhythm. The apartment was quiet. She moved through the entryway and looked toward the kitchen. Empty. The living room. Empty. She stopped at the hallway. From the room Daniel used, the one he had made into a combination bedroom and office. The door usually slightly open, she heard his voice. She stood in the hallway and listened. He was on the phone. His voice had that quality she had heard once before through the wall, low, deliberate, utterly different from the quiet of his ordinary speech. This was not the voice of a man doing something casual. This was the voice of someone who understood exactly what was at stake and had built, over many years, the ability to speak about it without emotion. "The Calloway position is manageable," he was saying. "I want you to hold where we are, no further accumulation, and tell Marcus to stop moving until I give clearance." A pause. "Because I said so." No heat in it. Just finality. Another pause. "Yes. Keep me informed." Silence. Emily stood in the hallway for a moment longer than she should have. Then she walked back to the kitchen and made noise doing it, opening a cabinet, setting her bag on the table so that by the time Daniel appeared in the doorway a minute later, she had been there long enough to be credible. "You're home early," he said. "Board gave me the afternoon," she said. This was not quite true. "I wanted to think." He nodded. He went to the refrigerator, stood in front of it for a moment with his hands on the door, then closed it without taking anything. "Sit down," he said. She sat. He sat across from her. The table between them was the same table where she had found him with the open laptop, and the same table where she had eaten the breakfast he made on their first morning, and the same table where Lily did her homework every night. She was suddenly aware of how many conversations had happened across this table in 3 months. "I should tell you more than I have," he said. "Yes," Emily said. "You should." He told her the broad shape of it that evening. Not everything she understood, even as he spoke, that she was not getting everything, and she found she did not press for more than he was giving, which was unusual for her. She pressed for everything, always. She had built a career on pressing, but something in the way he talked about it, without drama, without performance, with the measured honesty of someone who has thought carefully about what to say, and has decided to say as much as is necessary, and no more, made her wait. He had started the fund 8 years ago. He had been 26, which was younger than she would have expected, except that when he described what he had understood about the market at that age, she believed him. He was not boasting, he was reporting. There was a difference, and she knew it, and she found that she respected it. His wife had died 4 years ago. Lily was 2. He had reorganized everything: the fund's operational structure, his public presence, his personal life in the aftermath of that, in a way that prioritized invisibility. He did not want the kind of life that his wealth could make visible. He did not want Lily to grow up as the daughter of a billionaire. He wanted her to grow up normal, or as close to normal as could be arranged. "And the marriage?" Emily said. "What did my father offer you?" He was quiet for a moment. "A credible reason to be living a visible, ordinary life," he said. "Your father's company was a convenient structure. The arrangement gave both of us something. He knew who you were. He knew enough. And I was." She stopped. "I was not consulted." "No," he said. "You weren't." The admission hung in the air. "I would like to have been consulted," she said. "I know," he said. "I'm sorry." It was, she realized, the first time he had apologized for anything since the wedding. And it did not sound like a performance. She followed him the next day. She told herself she was not following him. She told herself she was simply taking a different route to a meeting that happened to pass through the same neighborhood. These were lies of the kind that collapse under even mild examination. But Emily did not examine them. She saw him go into the building. It was a 20-story structure in the financial district, glass-fronted, with the kind of understated signage that belongs to companies that do not need to announce themselves. The lobby, visible through the revolving doors, was occupied by a reception desk and 2 security posts and a great deal of quiet. Daniel pushed through the doors. Emily was across the street, standing beside a parked car, her coffee going cold in her hand, watching. The 2 security men at their posts looked up and stood, not the standing of attention, not security professional alertness, the standing of people who have been told by every training and instinct in their bodies to demonstrate deference to the person who has just entered the room. The woman at the reception desk rose from her chair. Emily watched a man in a suit cross the lobby quickly to intercept Daniel, not to stop him, but to walk alongside him, matching his pace, speaking in the animated way of someone who has things to report. Daniel walked through the lobby without slowing. He said something in response to the man in the suit. The man in the suit nodded and wrote something down. They went into an elevator. The doors closed. Emily stood on the sidewalk for a long time. Then she went to her meeting and sat through 90 minutes of a conversation about the Callaway crisis and said very little. The revelation was not a single moment. This surprised her. She had expected, somewhere in the back of her mind where she kept the stories she told herself about how things worked, that the truth would arrive like a curtain being pulled, a clean dramatic gesture. Everything on one side, then suddenly everything on the other. Instead, it had arrived in pieces. The black sedan, the laptop screen, the initials in the footnote, the way the security men stood. And now the lobby, and now her memory of every interaction with Daniel over 3 months, running through her mind with the information she had not previously had, landing differently. The way he had stood at the altar, quietly, without fidgeting, as though he were accustomed to rooms that watched him. The way he had said, on their first morning, "I'll stay out of your way," not "I don't know how to be here." Not the language of a man trying to find his footing. The language of a man who has chosen, deliberately, to make himself small. The way he had asked, "Are you certain you're looking at the right problem?" She had thought it was presumptuous. She understood now that it was accurate. She confronted him that night. This is the word she would have used in the vocabulary she had built for professional disputes. Confront. It implied an adversarial structure, a clear aggressor and a clear defender. It implied that she had been wronged and was seeking accounting. By the time she was actually in the kitchen, standing across the table from him, the word felt imprecise. "I went to the building," she said. He looked up from whatever he had been reading. "I saw how they received you," she said. He set down the page. "You have $9 billion, she said, "and you've been living in my penthouse for 3 months in a suit you've worn to everything." "The suit fits," he said. "That's not the point." "I know." He looked at the table. Then, "What's the point, Emily?" It was the first time he had used her name that way without the practical context of a sentence, just her name, as a question. She sat down. She had not planned to sit. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because you didn't ask," he said. "You decided, on the day of the wedding, what I was. And everything after that was," he paused, "an attempt to confirm what you'd already decided." "That's not fair." "No," he said. "It's accurate." She was quiet. "I heard what you said at the reception," he said. "I didn't choose this." She remembered saying it. She remembered him looking at her across the room. "I didn't say it to hurt you," she said. "I know." He was very still. "But you said it loud enough for 12 people to hear. And Lily," he stopped. A muscle in his jaw moved. "Lily heard it." Emily went cold. "She didn't say anything," he said. "She doesn't. She processes things quietly. But she heard it." Emily thought about Lily's hand in hers as they left the altar. The small warmth of it. "Boo is worried about whether things are going to stay the same." "I'm sorry," Emily said. The words came out with more difficulty than she expected. She had said "I'm sorry" in professional contexts. Many times it was a tool, deployed strategically to move conversations forward. This was not that. Daniel looked at her. "I know you are," he said. "That's not enough," she said. "What I did, how I treated you, it wasn't." She stopped. "Tried again. I was cruel, not dramatically, just consistently, and I told myself it was justified, and it wasn't." He didn't answer immediately. "What do you want?" she asked. "From all of this? From the marriage?" She gestured vaguely, meaning the arrangement, the apartment, the 48-hour clock still ticking somewhere over the company that bore her family's name. He thought for a long time. "I want Lily to have a mother," he said. "Not a mother who was forced into it, a mother who chose it." He looked up. "I can't make that happen. Nobody can." Emily looked at him for a long time. Then she said, "And the company? What do you want with it?" "Nothing," he said. "It was leverage. I should have found another way." "But you did it." Yes, no apology in his voice for this, only honesty. I did it. Why? He was quiet, because, he said finally, I needed to know if you'd choose the right thing when you had to, when there was no easy option, when the company's survival and your own survival and the people who work for you were all pulling in different directions. He paused. I needed to know what kind of person I'd brought into Lily's life. The words landed with a weight she hadn't prepared for. She did not speak for a long time. Lily appeared in the doorway in her pajamas, holding Boo. She looked at Emily, then at her father, then back at Emily. Are you okay? She asked Emily directly. As though she had been considering whether to ask for some time, Emily looked at the girl, 6 years old, with her father's steady eyes. No, Emily said. Not entirely. Lily considered this. Okay, she said. She went to her father and put her hand on his arm. Then she looked at Emily again. Boo says that's okay. Not being okay. She went back down the hallway. Daniel and Emily sat in the kitchen. The clock on the wall moved. There were 407 people employed by Callaway Capital and its subsidiary operations. Emily knew this number because she had a habit of knowing the numbers that mattered, and this number had always mattered to her more than she typically allowed herself to say out loud. 407 salaries, 407 people who had taken a job with her company and built a portion of their lives around its continued existence. She thought about them on the morning of the board's 48-hour deadline. She had spent 2 days working through the architecture of the crisis understanding. Now, what she was actually dealing with. Not a hostile predator with opaque motivations, but a man who had structured a test and then handed her the answer key and waited. The holding vehicle could be settled, the positions could be unwound or restructured. Daniel had told her, in the plainest possible terms, that he would not exercise the vote, but there was still the underlying question. The one that had been there before the crisis, before she found the initials in the footnote, before the reception and the comment she made that Lily overheard. The company had real structural problems. The debt, the board's eroding confidence, 2 of her largest institutional relationships, already damaged. These were not problems that disappeared when an anonymous threat was revealed to be a complicated domestic situation. She had a choice. She could do the thing that was expected of her. Marshal the remaining board support, negotiate a bridge structure, keep operational control by doing what CEOs do when the company's existence is at stake, which was to make promises that would take years to cost her anything. Or she could do the right thing, which she had known for 6 months was the right thing, and had not done because the right thing was not the easy thing, and Emily Callaway had always been very good at finding reasons why the right thing needed more study. She called the board at 8 in the morning. She told them that the acquiring interest had been resolved. She did not explain how and that the 48-hour deadline was no longer operative. She told them she was proposing a restructuring, not of the company's operations, which were largely sound, a restructuring of its capital position, a reduction of her own equity stake, a renegotiation of the performance terms, and a new allocation of governance authority that gave the institutional investors more protection against exactly the kind of vulnerability they had just experienced. This would cost her, not catastrophically. She would remain at the helm, she would remain the CEO. But she would hold less, personally, than she had held before. She would share more. She would be accountable in ways that she had, over the years, carefully arranged not to be. Thomas Reyes was quiet for a moment at the end of her presentation. Then he said, "This is not what we expected." "I know," Emily said. "It's what I should have done 2 years ago." Another pause. "Send it over," Reyes said. She sent it. She came home at 7 that evening. Not late, not early, just 7. Daniel was in the kitchen. Lily was at the kitchen island with her homework spread out in front of her, a mechanical pencil in her hand, her tongue slightly at the corner of her mouth in the way she held it when something required concentration. Emily set her bag down by the door. "How did it go?" Daniel said. "I reduced my stake," she said, "and restructured the governance terms." He looked at her. "That cost you something?" "Yes." "Why?" She thought about the 407 people. She thought about the right thing. She thought about the conversation across the kitchen table the night before, and the question Daniel had said he needed answered. What kind of person had he brought into Lily's life? "Because it was the right thing," she said. "And I'd been avoiding it." Lily looked up from her homework. "Good job," she said, and went back to writing. Emily looked at the girl for a moment. Then she sat down at the kitchen island, at the end away from Lily's homework, and opened her own laptop. Daniel put a plate of food in front of her without being asked. She ate it. 3 months later, the kitchen in the morning was a different thing than it had been. Emily could not have described precisely when it changed. It was one of those transitions that happens between the moments you're paying attention to, so that you look up one day and the new configuration has been true for long enough that you've stopped registering it as new. She woke at 6 now. Not always, but often enough. The first morning she had come into the kitchen before Daniel and made the coffee herself. She had stood at the counter and realized she did not know how much coffee he put in, and had felt, for a moment, embarrassed not to know this about someone she lived with. She had made it by guessing, and she had gotten it wrong too strong, and Daniel had drunk it without comment. And when she told him later that she had known it was wrong, he had smiled. A small, real smile. The kind she had not seen before, because she had not been looking. She was looking now. On a Thursday morning in late June, Emily came into the kitchen at 6:15. Daniel was there. He had made coffee correctly and was scrambling eggs, and Lily was sitting at the island in her school clothes, reading a book about whales, which was the current subject of what she described as her research. Lily's research projects were self-assigned and conducted with total seriousness, and Emily had learned not to interrupt them with questions until Lily surfaced on her own. Emily poured her coffee and sat down. Lily did not look up. Daniel did not speak. The kitchen was quiet except for the eggs in the pan and the distant sound of the city below traffic, a delivery truck, the ordinary machinery of morning. Emily thought about the board meeting she had this afternoon. She thought about the restructuring, which was proceeding on schedule. She thought about Thomas Reyes, who had told her last week, with the particular approval of a man who disapproves of everything and therefore considers his approval a significant gift, that she had made the right call. She thought about Stuart Fitch, who had returned her call eventually, and whom she trusted now in the way you trust someone you've learned to trust less. She thought about 407 people. "You're quiet this morning," Daniel said. "Thinking," she said. "About the board?" Among other things, he set a plate in front of her. She had stopped finding this strange. She had stopped cataloging the ways in which this daily practice was different from her expectations of how her life would work. Lily surfaced from her book. "Did you know," she said, addressing both of them without distinction, "that whales can hear each other from 2,000 miles away?" "I didn't know that," Emily said. "They're very loud," Lily said, "but you can't hear them because the frequency is too low." She went back to her book. Emily looked at Daniel. He was leaning against the counter with his coffee, watching his daughter read, and his expression was the most unguarded she had ever seen on his face, not happy in the performed sense, not performing anything at all, just present, just a man in his kitchen watching his child be absorbed in whales. She thought about what he had said, on the night of the confrontation that was not quite a confrontation. "I want Lily to have a mother who chose it." Emily picked up her fork. She ate her breakfast. She watched the morning light move across the kitchen island. She had not, technically, chosen any of this. She had been arranged into it, placed into it by the calculations of men who thought they knew what she needed and had not bothered to tell her. But somewhere in the last 6 months, between the confrontation and the board meeting, between the 407 people and the morning she had come in at 6:15 and found nobody and made the coffee herself, she had made choices. Small ones. The choice to sit down instead of leaving. The choice to say "I'm sorry" and mean it. The choice to eat the breakfast that was made for her instead of noting that she had not asked for it. The choice to be here, this morning, in this kitchen, eating eggs, and listening to a 6-year-old discuss the acoustic range of whales. Daniel caught her looking at him. She did not look away. "What?" he said. "Nothing," she said. "Just thinking." "You said that already." "I'm still doing it." Lily looked up again, briefly, checking the temperature of the room with those serious eyes. Found what she was looking for, or did not find what she was afraid of, and looked back at her book. Emily returned to her breakfast. Outside, the city was fully in motion now. The morning rhythms of a place that did not pause for anyone's interior rearrangements, that moved at exactly the same pace whether you were falling apart or coming together or something in between that didn't yet have a name. Inside, the kitchen was warm. The coffee was right. The eggs were done the way she liked them. She had told him once, a month ago, in passing, and he had remembered without making a point of it. She did not think about the $9 billion. She did not think about the penthouse, or the cracked shoes, or the ivory dress, or the reception where she had said, "I didn't choose this loud enough for 12 people and a 6-year-old girl to hear." She thought about whales speaking to each other across 2,000 miles in a frequency too low to hear, about how much passes between people in the space beneath language, about how long it can take to learn to listen for it. More coffee? Daniel said. Please, Emily said. He filled her cup. The morning continued.